Tonight, Donald Trump is gleefully posting more footage of U.S. attacks on Iran, all while ratcheting up his bloodthirsty rhetoric. He shared this clip tonight of what he called a, quote, massive strike in Tehran. It is unclear when this strike took place, though, and whether any new military leaders were killed or what the source of the actual video is. Now, this comes just 2 days after he celebrated this strike on a bridge near Tehran on Thursday, which killed 8 people and injured nearly 100. Trump later posted, quote, our military hasn't even started destroying what's left in Iran. Bridge is next. Iran electric power plants. A day before Trump said this.
We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
Stuck in the middle of the violence are everyday Iranians just trying to survive. One Tehran business owner told the New York Times, quote, Iran is being destroyed in front of our eyes. What if we are left here to rot in the hands of this regime with no connection to the outside world? Joining us once again is Kian Tashbaksh, a former political prisoner who was released as part of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. He's an international relations professor at New York University and a fellow at Columbia University's Committee on Global Thought. Professor, it's great to have you back on the show. It seems a little bit of a disconnect here because the rhetoric that we're hearing from the administration is becoming, as we described, more bloodthirsty, wanting to return Iran to the Stone Age. We're hearing even tonight with the post from Donald Trump, glory be to God that we're going to destroy them. And this kind of like language that I think for people in the region, but specifically in Iran, I'm sure if they are hearing that, if they have access to outside information, I'm sure Iran State TV is probably playing that for them and showing them what they're doing to, you know, highlight the agenda or the narrative of the regime. But if you were to hear that as an Iranian, what would go through your mind that this is the kind of language that America is evoking as it bombs your country?
Right. Well, thank you very much for having me on again. First of all, let me say, as an American citizen and as an Iranian citizen, I am very disturbed by this kind of language. I mean, I don't want my American president to speak in these terms. And as an Iranian, I don't want to hear those things being said about the country. Now, that said, I think that many people inside Iran, they are sophisticated. They are not naive. They know that Donald Trump is someone who uses very unconventional language for a politician. It's a lot of bluster, a lot of hyperbole. So they discount, I think, a lot of what what he says, and they look to see what's happening on the ground. And what they see happening on the ground, and I think this is important, is that the targeted strikes, I mean, the strikes that have been happening mostly in the last month have been quite targeted. I think a lot of people inside Iran and people I speak to on a daily basis, or let's say 2 or 3 times a week when we have a chance, they do recognize that the targets are those which are the regime's IRGC.
They hit a music school.
Well, okay, so I think that...
I mean, that was one of them, right? You know about the music school that was hit?
Well, actually, no, I don't know about that.
Yeah, there was a music school that was hit. There was a video of the damage out building. Mm-hmm. There were Tehran University and other universities that were also hit. There was a bridge that was under construction that was also hit. There was a hospital, psychiatric ward that was hit.
Yes, and yeah, I mean, even more than that. Actually, there's what's called the Pasteur Institute.
Yeah.
Is actually one of the oldest and most respectable science facilities inside not only Iran but the Middle East, done absolutely cutting-edge work on vaccines and science. That has been destroyed. My position is very clear. If there are targeted strikes on civilian infrastructure or civilian areas, that should be absolutely condemned as a war crime. It should be followed. As an American citizen, I would be the first to actually, pursue that and condemn that. My assumption, though, is until we hear otherwise, especially given a situation where a lot of the American military is concerned about dwindling munitions, that I doubt that they would actually shoot missiles randomly at non-military targets. The bridge, for example, that you had in your intro, that has been quite clearly identified. Now, it's not 100% confirmed because we don't have all the access, but it's been fairly clearly identified as a bridge that was dedicated to convey very heavy ballistic missiles for the IRGC from one area of Tehran to an IRGC-controlled area. So I think that's part of this attempt to degrade the logistical background.
There was a story in the Wall Street Journal, though, about how there are people in the Pentagon who are trying to sort of like compile the evidence to suggest that it would be okay to target electric power plants because that would somehow, disable their missile systems or their, some other military functions. So, I mean, my concern, I'm not an Iranian citizen, but my concern would be that whatever a prioritization of military munitions might look like from a strategic perspective, that's not necessarily what they will do, because Donald Trump has already explicitly said he wants to do lots of other things as well, including taking out power plants, including bombing them back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, because you had this beautiful quote, I thought, that really summarized it quite well in your Substack, where you said on the language and on the tenor of the rhetoric when it comes to, civilian infrastructure and just the country writ large, it is morally ugly, strategically reckless, and politically costly. It sounds less like serious statecraft than punitive rage, and it will reinforce exactly the anti-American narrative on which the regime thrives, which I thought was very insightful. And you had, this Substack that I would encourage all of our viewers to read, just talking about how Trump's speech this week illuminated somewhat his policy for you, and it also made you question other elements of it. And could you just kind of explain why you feel that way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, his speech, it was disappointing, both as an American and as an Iranian, in a number of respects. First of all, the claim about regime change and saying so definitively that there has been regime change in Iran, my take on that is, well, first of all, he must know. I mean, it's either one of two things. Either he knows and that he's now misguiding and misleading both the Iranian people and the American people in not telling them the truth. The fact that, as I mentioned in my piece, we know exactly who is running the country right now, and these aren't new faces, as President Trump said. These aren't more reasonable faces. These are actually hardened members of the regime that have always been there for 2 or 3 decades. So he should be straight, both with the American people about what has been achieved, because otherwise everyone knows it's going to be reported, like on the Tonight Show, and he's going to look either as someone who is not telling the truth. And for Iranians, they would feel insulted, I think, by the fact that they are now living under a regime that the American president is saying has been completely changed.
Or more moderate or more reasonable.
Yes,
I read that moment as him trying to walk back what had been a sort of implicit, sometimes explicit promise in the lead up to all of this. He and other members of the administration described the project of democracy, of freeing Iran, as a major reason that Americans should support this war, that polls, of course, show Americans very much do not. And so then to not have evidence that you're actually following through on that promise, I think he's kind of trying a rhetorical trick there where he has it both ways. Like, well, if you're going to hold me to the standard of regime change, I did kill some of those guys. But also, I never promised regime change, so I can't be wrong. I found that to be a very slippery, tricky thing, so that he can't be held accountable by Iranian Americans in the diaspora, who may feel betrayed in some cases. He can't be held by Americans wondering sort of like, why, what are we doing? And what were you trying to tell me this was all about in the first place?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think, it is true, and I think we should remember that I think from the beginning of the war, President Trump and the administration said that we are not interested in doing the regime change. We want to prepare the conditions so that the Iranian people themselves do it. I think we should remember that is what he said.
On the first day of strikes, he encouraged people.
He
called for people to go out there.
Yes, that's
something
right.
that's an incredibly dangerous call to make if you haven't actually sufficiently created the conditions for people to do that.
I just want to add one real quick point, just to kind of make it for our viewers about the bridge and the infrastructure. I think that, like, when you talk for our viewers here, we take I-95, I-75. Those are federal highways in this country. We've all been on highways where we've seen American military trucks moving from bases in and out through on these highway system. it would be inconceivable for me to think that if, God forbid, Iran has the ability to strike an American highway, to say we are going to hit I-95, we're going to hit the George Washington Bridge, we're going to hit whatever highway system we can because we know that it connects American military bases, when the vast majority of the people who use the infrastructure. And so I have this problem with this argument of like just relying on America and Israel to say these are military targets and we're justifying it when we don't have any independent way of even determining to what extent something is a military target or not. I just think I think it's something important for our viewers to understand that like when we talk about these things, because we don't have visibility and most of us don't understand how Tehran is a huge city of millions of people, overlaps with government, overlaps with military, overlaps with civil society, to then just say, hey, we're going to bomb this hospital because it happens to be, or bomb a school because it happens to be next to a military base, and then you get 175 school children killed. So.
Oh yes, that's right. So I mean, I mean, the only thing I'd say about that is that in war, the issue of collateral damage is a tragic, almost inevitability. And the issue is whether civilians are targeted deliberately. That's one issue. And the second issue is whether that kind of collateral damage is a exception or whether it's the rule. And so Iran is deliberately, for example, targeting residential areas throughout the Gulf Arab countries and in Israel. And so my assumption is, I should hold my government, the American government, to a very high standard if it is shown that there was negligence, which I believe for the school children, the girls' school, that 175 girls' school, that was negligence, and that there should be accountability for that. But I should also say, remember, and this is a controversial issue, is that the same tactics that were used in Gaza are tactics that the Iranian IRGC had taught both Hezbollah and Hamas, and that is to embed military installations and military facilities within residential areas. And one argument about Iran, what makes it complicated, is that given the air superiority of Israel and America, the IRGC may be hiding in some of these issues. But I know that's controversial, and without independent confirmation, it's hard to say.
We look forward to having you back to talk about all of this very soon.
Luckily, we got AI to help us with the targeting. So
oh, Lord. Another conversation for another day. Kian Tajbakhsh, thank you so much. Great to have you.